Hello friends, I am Sunil Ranjan and I'm an English teacher. Now in this session I have come up with the summary of Hard Times by Charles Dickens. As the title goes, Dickens' story is really about hard times the members of a family have because of the strong belief of the father in the facts of life only. He feels that emotions carry no value and it acts nowhere in human life. Thomas Gradgrind is a wealthy retired merchant in the industrial city of Coketown, England. He has devoted his life to the philosophy of rationalism, self-interest and fact. He has two children, Louisa and Tom. He never allows them to engage in fanciful or imaginative pursuits. He has set up a school. Out of kindness, he has taken a student, the kindly and imaginative Sissy Jupe, after the disappearance of her father, who was a circus entertainer. As Tom and Louisa grow older, Tom becomes a degenerated and self-interested person. He begins to believe in physical pleasure only, and Louisa struggles with a deep feeling of missing something important in her life. Eventually, she marries Gradgrind's friend Josiah Bounderby, a wealthy factory owner and banker who is more than twice her age. Bounderby always blows his trumpet as a self-made man who was abandoned in the gutter by his mother when he was an infant. Tom is apprenticed at the Bounderby Bank and Sissy remains at the Gradgrind home to look after the younger children. There is a low laborer, Stephen Blackpool, who falls in love with Rachel, another poor factory worker. He is unable to marry her because he is already married to a horrible woman who disappears for months and sometimes even years. Stephen visits Bounderby to ask about a divorce, but learns that only the wealthy can do that. Outside Bounderby's home, he meets Mrs. Pegler, a strange old woman with complete devotion to Bounderby. James Harthouse, a member of parliament and a wealthy young polished man from London, arrives in Coketown to begin a political career as a follower of Gradgrind. Fascinated by Louisa, he tries to seduce her. With the help of Sparsit, a former aristocrat who now works for Bounderby, he sets about to corrupt Louisa. The lowest labourers, whom Dickens calls hands, are provoked by a corrupt union spokesman, Slackbridge, to form a union. Stephen refuses to join because he feels that a union strike would only increase tension between employers and employees. He is thrown out by the other labourers and fired by Bounderby when he refuses to keep watch on them. Louisa is impressed with Stephen's integrity. She visits him before he leaves Coketown and helps him with some money. Tom accompanies her and tells Stephen that if he waits outside the bank for several nights, help will come to him. Stephen does so, but no help arrives. Eventually he packs up and leaves Coketown in the hope of finding agricultural work in the country. After some time, the bank is robbed. The only suspect is Stephen, who was seen moving around outside the bank for several nights just before disappearing from the city. Mrs. Sparsit witnesses Harthouse declaring his love for Louisa, and Louisa agrees to meet him in Coketown later that night. But she flees to her father's house where she sadly opens her heart to her father Gradgrind. She opens up that her upbringing has left her married to a man she does not love, deeply unhappy and possibly in love with Harthouse, and collapses to the floor. Shocked deeply at his approach in life, Gradgrind begins to realize the imperfections in his philosophy of self-interest. Sissy, who loves Louisa deeply, visits Harthouse and convinces him to leave Coketown forever. Bounderby gets furious as his wife has left him. He tries his best to capture Stephen. When Stephen returns to clear his name, he falls into a mining pit called Old Hell Shaft. Rachel and Louisa discover him, but he dies soon after an emotional farewell to Rachel. Gradgrind and Louisa realize that it is Tom who is responsible for robbing the bank. They arrange to get him out of England with the help of the circus performers with whom Sissy had spent her early childhood. They are nearly successful but are stopped by Biz, a young man who had gone to Gradgrind's school and who has attained all the qualities of the detached rationalism that Gradgrind once supported, but who now realizes its limits. Sleary, the circus proprietor, arranges for Tom to slip out of Biz's hold, and the young Tom manages to escape from England. Mrs. Parsit gets anxious to help Bounderby find the robbers. He drags Mrs. Pigler, a known associate of Stephen Blackpool, to see Bounderby, thinking she is a possible witness. Bounderby is surprised when he comes to know that Mrs. Pigler is actually his loving mother, whom he had forbidden to visit him. Angrily, Bounderby fires Mrs. Parsit and sends her away to her hostile relatives. 5 years later, he dies alone in the streets of Coketown. Gradgrind gives up his philosophy of fact and devotes his political power to helping the poor. Tom realizes his mistake but dies without seeing his family again. Sissy marries and has a large and loving family, but Louisa does not marry again and has no children. Louisa is loved by Sissy's family and learns eventually how to feel sympathy for her fellow human beings. So here comes the end of this summary. My dear friends, if you have subscribed to my channel, well, it's fine. If you haven't, do subscribe to my channel so that in future I come up with finer videos for you. And that's my promise. Thank you.